Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. So we're back with issue 46, and for a little bit of a difference, we're actually going to cover the lore articles, which is only one page, and all of our gaming articles in this video, meaning when we come to the next video, we can dive straight into the game without having too much long-winded coverage of core rules, etc. before. So yeah, we have one little page of orcs, which is all about brutal but cunning. Then we have a look at Only War, the 40k introductory sort of mission. Then we look at the Aeldari, combat patrol enhancements, secondaries and objectives, and stratagems even, before taking a look at the Chaos Space Marine faction ability Dark Pacts, which is awesome. It really brings the faction to life, where you pray to your gods of chaos, and then you can either give your weapons lethal hits or sustained hits 1, which is pretty good. So critical wounding on 6s, or automatically wounding on 6s with lethal hits, or gaining additional hits on your 6s, which is pretty good. And if you're up against a tough opponent, go for your lethal hits so that any of your 6s auto wound them. But if you're up against a horde unit like a Termagants, empower your combat weapons with sustained hits so your chainsaws rip through them a little bit easier. So yeah, we'll cover those rules and stuff before we do anything else then. Don't forget to, of course, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment down below. Let me know which is your favourite of the combat patrol rules so far. Really do enjoy, I think, Aeldari's Fate Dice abilities. Are pretty cool, where you can exchange a singular dice for one of your Fate Dice. So really hits into the Aeldari driven by fate aesthetic, which is pretty cool. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Finally then, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop, your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. You stock everything you need for your entire Warhammer journey, from your first model to your awesome elite unit, all the paints you need to add those highlights to your models, and of course, items to decorate your hobby room, such as artwork, and collectible items such as pin badges to decorate your bags. So check out warbay.shop as usual, there's a link in the video description, and you can also head down to their physical store and pick up some awesome hobby items for a bit of a discount. Right, let's head to the table, cover this new page of lore and these rules. And join me for a full Combat Patrol game next video, where the Aeldari will face the Space Marines. So we're back with issue 46, and we've got our updated models here ready to do battle. So we'll put these off to one side, as they'll be seeing the field of battle very soon. And we can also retire our new paints to the drawer. So yeah, I can see these coming in very handy when we come to some of the other models in our collection. Stormhost Silver is going to be used quite a lot on our Chaos Space Marines to highlight all that gold. And yeah, like Crystal Flesh, we're going to have quite a lot of levers, especially when it comes to the Cadians later on in the collection. But yeah, we could also probably see this used on faces, as Catch and Flesh is a good base coat for dark skin, and this will be an ideal highlight for the skin as well. So yeah, hopefully these are going to be a good tool for us to use in future combat patrols. But yeah, these can go in the drawer for the moment, and we'll dive into our new lore and gaming articles. So here we go with our latest articles. We'll dive straight into it, past our paint guides, which are very useful, so do keep these handy. They'll come in great use for future updates to models as we progress through this collection. So here's our first of the new articles. It's our one and only read article, and this is Brutal but Cunning. Brutal but Cunning. To face the orcs in battle is to face a furious tide of aggression. Great engines of war belch out foul vapours and fumes. Earth-shaking war cries are raised, and machines of death clank unsteadily forward. Every measure of their effort and resources are dedicated to violence, destruction, and all-consuming brutality. Orcs are feared for their brutality. Many foes have underestimated the sheer aggression of the orcs, and few of them have lived very long afterwards. Given the slightest chance and often no provocation, an orc horde will launch all of itself forwards towards the enemy at once, screaming, bawling and thrashing until the battle is over. Each orc is motivated not by survival but by getting a piece of the action. However, even the most brutal orcs are not without their cunning. Sometimes a little bit of planning can give them the opportunity to be even more brutal. That's the type of proposition that seriously appeals to even the most enthusiastically fighty among their number. Ghazghkull Thraka leads an all-out charge straight towards the enemy position. There we got Mech in mega armor, Orc Warboss in mega armor, bunch of knobs, Ghazghkull himself, mega armored boys, and some battle wagons in the back there with their claws. Yeah. One unit I do want to get is a unit of knobs, just so we can add these guys to the force and pretty much round out the old Black Reach starter set. Squiggly beasts. Orcs tend to think of other living beings as either sources of food or entertainment. However, they have a curious affinity with some of the weirder and more dangerous beasts in the galaxy. They train these to use as deadly weapons or fearsome mounts. Ooge and Stompy. The orcs are not without an inventive streak, but their creations are usually put to use for war and fighting. Their contraptions can often be described as being either bigger, shootier, stompier, or more bashy than the previous contraptions that they replace. Bigger is better. In Orc society, the authority wielded by an individual is based on their ability to enforce it. The bigger orcs bully the smaller ones bully the Gretchen, and the Gretchen bully the tiny snotlings. The snotlings have been unable to find anyone smaller or more pathetic to bully. We splatted them gits. So there we go. A little bit more about orc culture and them being brutal and cunning. Moving on then, we got a look at the core rules page, Only War. The time has come to prove your worth as the greatest commander in the galaxy. All that stands between you and the ultimate glory is an opposing force bent upon your destruction. Destroy the enemy army and secure strategic sites littered across the battlefield while stopping your foe from doing likewise. So this is our basic sort of mission that the 40k rulebook presents us with. So we can use this as an example of how to muster forces for a combat patrol game. So first off, you muster your army, creating a battle roster as described in a previous article, so pages 55 to 56. Mission objectives, so starting in the command phase. Starting from the second battle round at the end of your command phase, players whose turn it is score 1 victory point for each objective marker they control for a maximum of 3. Create a battlefield, so players will create a battlefield, setting up terrain features as guidelines on pages 49 to 52. Board size, depending on the game you're playing, so Incursion and Strike Force games are 44 by 60. While Onslaught games are 44 by 90. Players must then alternate setting up objective markers on the battlefield until there are 6. The objective markers can't be... Objective markers can't be placed within 6 of a battlefield edge or 9 of another objective marker. Roll off to determine your attack and defender. Declare your battle formations, so attach your leaders, put your troops in transports, and mention which units are starting in reserve. Deploy your army, so starting with the attacker, models must be set up wholly within their controlling player's deployment zone. Continue setting up models until both players have finished setting up their armies, or you have run out of room to set up any more units. I always thought it started with the defender. Okay, so it starts with the attacker. If both players have units with abilities that allow them to set up after or both armies are deployed, the players must roll off to see who alternates setting these up first. Determine first turn with a roll off. Resolve pre-battle abilities, so anything you have that says before your battle begins, do this now. Begin your battle, so you start your first round and keep going until you end your battle at the end of round 5, or whichever team has kicked the other team's butt. Determine your victor, so tally up the victory points. And then we have the big old battlefield, so we go short edge to short edge, deploying 12 inches from the battlefield centre. Continuing on, we've got some new rules for our combat patrol forces. So much like with our Tyranids and Space Marines, we now have the Aeldari combat patrol rules. When you play a game of combat patrol, you can make choices about the special rules and abilities that will apply to your army during that game. You can choose between different enhancements that benefit your leader, secondary objectives that your army is striving to achieve, and stratagems for your army to use. So yeah, these are all pretty similar to what we've seen for the Space Marines and Tyranids, but with an Aeldari twist on things. So let's get into the meat of it, and that's looking at the enhancements, secondaries, and stratagems. So in combat patrol, enhancements are only taken by the leader of each army. In your Aeldari combat patrol, your leader is the Farseer. You automatically begin with Foresight enhancement. You can swap this for Eldritch Might if you so wish, but you must do this before the battle. So what does Foresight do? Once per turn you can target the bearer's unit with the Fire Overwatch stratagem. If you are within range of an objective marker you control, hits are scored on a 4 while resolving this stratagem. Otherwise you are scoring hits on 5s. So it's an improvement over 6s, but it's very situational. I think more suitable for the Farseer is going to be Eldritch Might. So each time you make a psychic attack, which most of your stuff has psychic abilities, reroll a hit roll of 1, a wound roll of 1, and a damage roll of 1. So pretty good. So to hit, we've got a 1, we get to reroll that. Then to wound, we've got, say, 2 1s, we'll get to reroll one of those. And then when it comes to our damage, if we've only got 1 damage but we wanted that big 6, we can reroll that. Secondary objectives. Victory points are key to winning games of combat patrol. In addition to the main objectives of the mission, you can also gain points through secondary objectives. You automatically get Ineffable Agenda as the secondary objective. If you wish, you can swap this out for a Greater Destiny before the battle begins. Ineffable Agenda. At the end of your turn, you score 3 points if you control one or more objective markers that are not within your deployment zone and that you did not control at the start of the turn. So, very good objective, perfect for getting you early points if you can zoom out of your deployment zone, as we see here, onto the objective. We could also go for Greater Destiny, so this is an end game objective, so at the end of the battle you'll score 10 points if one or more units from your army, excluding battle-shock units, are wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. So if somehow we've managed to leg it all the way across the battlefield, we'll score a massive 10 points for, well, finding our Greater Destiny. Finally then, we've got our stratagems, so whip fast reactions. So this allows a Aeldari infantry or mounted unit to get a -1 to opponent's hit rolls. So pretty good for if you're off against a big unit of termagants that are going to gun you down. You can get really dodgy and suffer them that extra penalty. Stormer's shots, so an Aeldari mounted, up to 2 Aeldari mounted units from your army, which if we split our squad of 6 into 2 squads of 3, we'll have. Or a single Aeldari infantry unit. Till the end of that phase, each time model it makes an attack, add 1 to your hit rolls. So it improves our shooting abilities, which is going to be pretty good. So boosting most of our hitting up to 3+. With that reroll from our jet bike's abilities, that's going to be even better. Lower chance of us actually failing any hits. And then finally, Zephyr Swift. So end of your shooting phase, up to 2 Aeldari mounted units not within engagement range of an enemy unit, and or 1 Aeldari infantry unit not within range of an engagement range of an enemy. Each of those moves each of those units may make a move of up to 6 inches. And after that, you can't declare charges though. So it's a nice way of getting in close for the range of your weapons and then backing out, making your opponent have to do a little bit more work. So finally then, for this issue, we have Chaos Space Marine faction abilities. Dark Pax is a faction ability that allows Chaos Space Marines to gain the blessings of the Infernal Gods. But such power comes at a high price. Once the boon has been spent, the mortal vessel who dared seek such power must stand before their Dark Master. If they are found to be unworthy, they will suffer their god's wrath. Dark Pacts. Beseeching the Chaos Gods with fanatical fervour, the profane champions of the heretic Astartes pray for diabolical boons, promising the vilest of offerings in return for their power. Each time a unit in your army is selected to shoot or fight, it can make a Dark Pact. If it does, select one of the following abilities for that unit's weapons to gain until the end of that phase. Once a unit has resolved its attacks after making a Dark Pact, it must take a leadership test. If the test is failed, they'll suffer D3 mortal wounds. Example: Dark Pacts. In this example, the Dark Apostle and his Dark Disciples are selected to make a Dark Pact. They must choose between lethal hits or sustained hits 1, adding to their weapons. Whichever they choose, that rule will apply to all of their weapons until the end of that phase. If the player chooses to use it during the shooting phase, then whichever they choose will apply to the Dark Apostle's bolt pistol. If they choose to use it during the fight phase, whichever they choose will apply to the Crozius and the combat weapons of the Dark Disciples. After attacking, they must take a leadership test, and if they fail, they will suffer D3 mortal wounds. So we got the choice here of lethal hits. So weapons with lethal hits in their profile are known as lethal hit weapons. Each time an attack is made with this weapon and a critical hit is scored, it will automatically wound a target. Sustained hits. Some weapons strike in a flurry of blows, tearing the foe apart with relentless ferocity. Weapons with a sustained hits X in their profile are known as sustained hits weapons. Each time an attack is made as such a weapon, if a critical hit is scored, add X to your total number of scored hits. So in this case it's 1. Dark Pact tutorial. In this tutorial we will look at how to use the 2 different boons that your force can be granted as a result of making a Dark Pact. We'll also look at how to pay the price for seeking the blessings of the Chaos Gods. So lethal hits. If a weapon with lethal hits in its profile, any critical wounds will automatically inflict a wound without a wound roll being made. A critical hit is a hit roll of 6. We must actually roll a 6 to get a critical hit, and cannot turn a 5 into a critical hit with modifiers. So yeah, only natural dice rolls will actually give you your benefits here. So as we see here, the Legionnaires are shooting and they've gone for that lethal hits bonus. So the Melter Gun has automatically wounded, and 2 of our bolt guns have automatically wounded, and 2 here have scored normal hits, and the rest have failed. Sustained hits. So if a weapon has sustained hits X in its profile, every time it makes a critical hit, an unmodified roll of 6, X additional hits are automatically made. In this case, keyword is sustained hits 1, so an additional 1 is scored on a critical hit. So here we have the same unit of Legionnaires shooting at all boys, and this time they are shooting and getting the sustained hits. So the Melter has scored another 6, so we now get 2 Melter Gun shots, and 4 bolt guns have scored hits, 2 of which are sustained, so we score a total of 6 bolt gun hits, with the other 4 being discarded. Finally, we must pay the price. The Legionaries have made a Dark Pact. After resolving their attacks, that they must take a leadership test. The player scores a 5, which means the test is a fail. The player rolls D3, result of a 2. The unit will take 2 mortal wounds. So they have lost a guy. If they scored a 3, they would have lost a guy and a half. So the Dark Gods do beseech a heavy toll for their gifts. Last thing to look at then, before we can end this video, is what's in our next combat patrols. So that means there'll be less for us to do next video. So what is in our next 2 combat patrols? The Death Copters. So we add a new unit to our Orcs with issues 47 and 48, parts 1 and 2 of the Death Copters. So these are awesome ramshackle helicopters with lots of missiles added on and extra razor blades on the rotor blades. We also have more highlighting to look at. So I fully expect us to look at perhaps Orcs and Chaos Space Marines. We also have faction abilities. So we're most likely in this issue 47 we're going to look at the Chaos Space Marines enhancements, secondaries and stratagems, which will be quite good because it means we'll have everything we need for a full game of combat patrol with the Chaos Space Marines and the Aeldari using all of their faction abilities. And then issue 48, we'll have Cunning but Brutal, so kind of an opposite to the article we got with this issue. We learn about melee weapons of the 41st millennium, and we'll most likely have a tutorial on how to make use of our Deathcopters. We'll also have build and paint articles for these new units. Then in issues 49, we get Orc Faction Abilities Part 1, so we'll get to look at the War ability. And we start our final Orc unit for the basic combat patrol, the Death Dread, which will be finished in issue 50. Or next delivery in my case. But there we have it. That's our next two combat patrols, and yeah, these are awesome updates to the Assault and Black Reach Deathcopters, which were the first updates to the classic metal Deathcopters, which were notoriously good at falling to pieces, which I guess is very orky in a way. But yeah, they were metal and they didn't stay together very well. Never actually had one myself, so can't speak from experience. But there we have it. That is it for issue 46. Up next, like I said, is a full game of Combat Patrol, where we'll be having the Aeldari face off against the Space Marines. So I hope you'll join me for that, and all that's left me to do is to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on more Combat Patrol Carnage. Goodbye.